Chapter 10, Sprawl's Truth. Flat stretched the summit, wind scraping his face raw under endless blue. His pack lay discarded, water nearly gone, snacks thin. 40 hours since the valley, each step shifting what he carried inside more than out. Cross-legged he sat on stone. The sprawl hummed, threads vibrating in thin air. Visions sharpened, market cracks, social splits, futures once hazy, now clear. The peak spoke what valleys hinted, a net holding him, even when the dark beckoned him to fall. Scarred lungs caught fresh air, old wounds silvered. Those attempts weren't escape, desperate grabs for connection. The sprawl refused his surrender, sent him back till he could see this. Wind-washed stone held him, flesh meeting rock, one presence meeting another. He'd made it. The sprawl sang clear, vision sharp as winter air. Hands pressed stone, no gap now. Self to mountain, mountain to sky. The peak filled his brother's hollow, not replacing, completing, whole at last. Summit air sliced through pretense. Here above tangled lives, clarity emerged not as escape, but immersion. Service to others, his forgotten pulse, beat against hollow ambitions. Markets, governments, faith systems, all shimmered as one fabric threaded with breath and blood. His visions never predicted apocalypse, but unveiled connection. 40 hours of ascent had stripped away false divisions, psychiatric labels, bipolar, schizotypal, dissociative, dissolved into insufficient containers for consciousness that refused boundaries. Diagnosis had mistaken insight for illness, treating symptoms while killing perception. Medication dulled not delusion, but discernment. Brother's absence, that wound around which he'd built walls, revealed itself as transformation rather than ending. Death changed patterns, not presence. Grief's sharp edge had carved spaces where compassion now flowed. Service to others filled these spaces not with distraction, but completion. Vibrating threads between all things hummed visibly now. Thich Nhat Hanh called this interbeing, the profound recognition that nothing exists independently, that all phenomena arise in mutual dependence. The Sprawl's hymn sang this truth. No separate self exists anywhere in this vast tapestry. Systems emerged in his vision, economies, societies, ecologies, not as discrete institutions, but nested hierarchies of emergent order. Market crashes, social upheavals weren't supernatural prophecies, but natural perceptions of building tensions, just as animals sense earthquakes before instruments detect them. Breathing slowed as revelation deepened. His attempts at self-destruction emerged not as escape, but as misunderstood yearning for dissolution of false boundaries. The isolated ego, that fiction of separation, had become unbearable against the reality of connection. Suicide attempts, desperate lunges toward wholeness through the wrong door. Psychiatrists had called his visions pathological. Reality called them perceptive. Like Cassandra, cursed with foresight others couldn't comprehend, he'd carried the burden of seeing patterns before they fully manifested. Vision without language becomes madness. Language without vision becomes empty. Jesus had expressed this unity through vibrant imagery. I am the vine, you are the branches. Not metaphor, but reality. Differentiated yet unified, many yet one. Not separate entities, but a single living system. Connections pulse, beating beneath apparent division. Memories flooded back. Sitting with suffering strangers, feeding hungry families, building shelters during storms. Service had always been his sanctuary, the place where artificial boundaries between self and other thinned to transparency. Loving others had never been sacrifice, but recognition. There was no other to sacrifice for. Quantum entanglement, synchronicity, intercessory prayer, different languages naming the same reality. At fundamental levels, there exist no objects, only relationships. His brother's death had not removed him from this web, but changed the pattern, transformation rather than ending. Pharmaceutical interventions address symptoms while obscuring the pattern. His consciousness naturally resisted compartmentalization. What psychiatry labeled pathological were actually perceptions of interconnection too vast for conventional frameworks to accommodate. Cold stone beneath him carried Earth's memory. Markets collapsed when seen as separate from ecosystems. Communities fractured when prosperity was hoarded rather than circulated. His visions of economic instability stem not from paranoia, but from piercing the illusion of separation between economy and ecology, wealth and well-being. Serving others, his natural inclination, now revealed itself as the only rational response to reality's interconnected nature. Compassion, not moral virtue, but clear perception. Selfish action, not immoral, but fundamentally delusional. When no true separation exists, service becomes self-interest properly understood, wind carved invisibly across exposed skin. The sprawl, this web of relations constituting reality, was neither delusion nor metaphor, but existence itself. Modern physics confirmed what mystics always knew. At quantum levels, separation dissolves into probability waves of relationship. Visions that had tormented him now anchored him. Market systems, social structures, ecological networks, all pulsed with the same patterns at different scales, fractals of relationship, repeating from quantum to cosmic levels. The cursed gift of seeing these patterns had driven him to madness and medication. Acceptance brought him to wisdom and service. Summit stones held ancient witness to human striving. His brother, whose absence had torn reality's fabric, remained woven into the sprawl's pattern. Grief transformed from loss to presence, absence to different connection. Death changed form, not existence. The vine remained unbroken. Breath synchronized with wind's rhythm. The nameless sprawl that some call God, others call consciousness, others call quantum field, pulsed through everything. Mystical vision and scientific insight converged at this summit of perception. His madness had been premature sanity, his dysfunction, precocious adaptation to reality's interconnected nature. Cross-legged on stone, vision clarified totally. Service to others was service to self, not through mystical platitude, but through ontological fact. The sprawl refused simple categories, thrived in paradox. Individual consciousness, both illusion and reality, both separate and connected, both autonomous and intertwined. Hands press stone, no gap now between self and mountain, mountain and sky. Descent awaited, carrying this insight back to valleys where others struggled with separation's pain. The sprawl sang clear through every fiber, every synapse. Visions sharp as winter air cut through comfortable delusions. He'd made it. Wholeness beckoned not as achievement, but as recognition. The peak filled his brother's hollow, not replacing, completing. Service to others now revealed as service to the whole. Wind-washed stone held him, flesh meeting rock. One presence acknowledging another across illusory boundaries. Descent whispered ahead, return to the valley, carrying summit's truth, not as burden, but as gift.